All right, well, welcome everyone to our April 27th webcast showcasing a day in the life of a PMO, and thank you all for joining. My name is Victoria, and I'll just get the webcast started a little bit on how to keep your PMO running as efficiently as possible. So if at any time during this webcast you have any questions, please just write them in the messaging section to either Erin, myself, and we will try our very best to address them. This webcast is being recorded, and we'll send out the recording together with a survey later today. We really do appreciate the responses as they guide the content and services we provide. So a little bit about myself. I am our marketing manager out of the Seattle area. Harry Little is the client executive for the Midwest region, and he would be your point of contact for Vibrant Fusion and Microsoft. And Erin Harklerode is our Senior Solutions Architect specializing in Project and SharePoint. And he has 3 monitors.
That's a special part about me.
Very special. So, little quick poll. Feel free to enter it into the chat window. What's your role in a PMO if you have one? Or what tools are you using? You can also feel free to message me privately if you prefer. Typically, we have a lot of members of PMOs, project managers.
Don't be bashful, folks. There's a chat window in the WebEx. Feel free to use it for this. And as Victoria said, any questions that come up during the presentation. So while they're thinking about this, do you want to go ahead and tell them about us a little bit?
I can definitely do that. Well, I guess I can share a little bit about Vibrant Fusion. So Vibrant Fusion is a full-service project management solution provider. And as a Microsoft Gold partner for project and portfolio management, we provide PMO and project server-related consulting and staffing services, emphasizing implementation, migration, and staffing. Our specialty product, Quick PMO, is a built-on solution for Microsoft Project and helps organizations get started quickly with projects. And I did say project server, but I should have said just project online, and project server. So Vibrant Fusion was recently acquired by Microsoft, which is a Microsoft joint venture, and they offer consulting and support services with Power BI, managed services, and staff augmentation. They have a larger global footprint that allows us to provide a larger variety of solutions, as well as local implementation throughout the United States and beyond. We just had an additional acquisition in the past 3 weeks, and so we truly are able to provide services coast to coast across the country. So I guess that's a little bit about us.
Great.
So I did get a couple responses privately. So the majority of people are using Microsoft projects, and from the responses I have are in PMO. So it's great. Aligns with exactly what we're going to be covering.
Good deal.
So Erin,
okay.
I hand the torch to you.
All right. Thanks very much, Victoria. So again, I'm Erin. If you have questions during this webcast, as Victoria mentioned, feel free to type them in the chat window. And, we'll do our best. Hopefully, Victoria or Harry, who are both on this call, can monitor them and find a good time to interject and get those questions answered for you. That said, if you also, at the very end, we'll reserve about 5, 10, 15 minutes for Q&A at the end if you have any questions that went unanswered. So for the demo portion of this webcast, what I'm going to be sharing with you guys are some best practices, tips, tricks, things like that around various areas within Project Online. So I'll be using the Microsoft Project Online, which those of you that are not familiar, that's Microsoft's full PPM, Project Portfolio Management solution in the cloud. It's one of the Office 365 applications. So if you're using Office 365, you can add Project Online as an additional service. If you're not using Office 365, well, by all means, you can implement Office 365 and then use Project Online, or there is an on-premises equivalent of Project Online, which is called Project Server. They are now up to the 2016 version of Project Server. And from a functionality standpoint, even though I'm using the cloud version today, the online version, if you have or are considering Project Server, the functionality is essentially equivalent between the two, between the cloud and the on-premises version of that PPM tool. You'll also see me use MS Project as well. So when I refer to MS Project, I'm speaking specifically of the client applications that project managers would typically use to manage a schedule, perhaps manage costs, update progress within their project plan. Within the Project Online environment, resource managers might also use that MS Project application for some resource management capabilities. And those are some of the things you're going to see in the demo. Specifically, I'll start off, after I give you a real quick overview of the environment itself, I'll start off telling you about a couple different ways that you can get projects onboarded into the environment, including using an ideation process. We'll take a look at the portfolio analysis capabilities in Project Online. So once you have a portfolio of projects that are in flight, that are executing, and you have perhaps some incoming requests, proposals, and you want to see among those proposals, compared with your in-flight projects, do we have bandwidth in our resource pool to tackle those projects? And are some of these proposals, are they, strategically beneficial to do? So by using the portfolio analysis tool, you can assess whether or not the projects you're currently doing or the projects you're considering doing, are they, so to speak, moving your company closer to its strategic goals, getting you closer to the end zone. I'll show you a few different examples of dashboards, reports at the project level, dashboards across multiple projects. So whether we're talking a program, a portfolio, if you have multiple portfolios in your organization, sub-portfolios is another term that some people use. Or maybe you just want to look at a group of projects that are owned by a particular PM or that are affiliated with a specific department. So we have all kinds of ways to slice and dice the projects within the tool to take a look, when we are viewing a dashboard, at aggregate details across collections of projects. So, we'll use that as a method to determine, A, do we have any underperforming projects within that grouping, within that program or within that portfolio, potentially? And what are some ways we can get those projects back on track if they are underperforming? Also along the way, you'll see various ways to track project budgets and costs. So whether it's doing it sort of bottom up in the project schedule in MS Project or doing it top down by using project fields or using an application, we'll take a look at a few different ways you can do that. And then we'll also, at the end, we'll take a look at some of the reports that we have from a resource manager perspective to see, hey, how can I keep track of what my team is doing? How can I help the PMO with some strategic planning? If we are looking at perhaps doing some new projects in the next quarter, do we have enough resources to tackle those, et cetera? So those are the technical demos that you're going to see, more or less in that order that were on that agenda screen. But when I do sort of a day in the life and try to run soup to nuts through everything here from project creation to project management to, reporting and stuff like that, I might, if the situation lends itself, bounce from one topic to the next, but I will definitely make sure I cover all those areas that you just saw. So start off here. The first topic, again, once I give you an overview of the environment itself, we're going to talk about, how you get projects loaded into the system. And if you've got a lot of project ideas that get floated around your organization, most organizations, different departments, different people will pitch ideas for projects. What are some ways within the tool we can handle that without, overloading the system with, too many ideas that somebody has to manage, maintain, and, perhaps delete if they never get approved as projects. So on that note, let me switch over to my Project Online screen. All right, so again, those of you that are familiar with Office 365, Project Online is one of the services within. If you're not familiar with Office 365, it's Microsoft's cloud platform that provides lots of different productivity, messaging. So if I was to click on this, what we refer to as the waffle up here in the menu, you can see some of the features that we have within Office 365. So Exchange Online is one of those Office 365 features. I could do calendaring, Yammer, so enterprise social. OneDrive, so if you do a lot of file sharing and document management and you want to have users that can sync documents so that they can work offline with those, share them with people inside, external to the organization, OneDrive, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of applications within the Office 365 suite. Project Online is one of them. So it's the, the full-blown project and portfolio management tool within that suite. The home page that you're looking at here, or the landing page, you might hear me refer to the acronym PWA from time to time. That stands for Project Web App. So if you are in the web browser communicating with Project Online or Project Server, that is essentially what Project Web App is. So if I'm in the browser, as I am here, and I'm navigating into the Project Center or taking a look at my timesheet to fill out my time for the week, or looking at the issues, risks, or I've accessed a specific project and I'm working with the details of it, but I'm doing so in the browser, you're in that PWA interface. Okay, so these tiles at the top are both navigation tiles, and as you can see on some of them, there are some details underlying the tiles. So for instance, if I click on the My Tasks page, pretty intuitively named, that's a page that's going to show me tasks that are assigned to me from various projects. And that tile said that there are 97 different tasks assigned to me from various projects in here. So I can use this to keep track of what's on my plate. I can also use this as a time reporting mechanism too. So if timesheet is one option, but I could also use this task page over here, and I could put in either actual hours worked on tasks in a time period, or I could update % complete. So those are different ways to configure the collection of time reporting from your various resources that are working on projects in this platform. Okay, give you a couple other examples of just some core functionality before we dive into some projects. The Resource Center is another very key area of Project Online. So by having a centralized database of resources, what we refer to as the Enterprise Resource Pool, okay, you're able to do accurate modeling of demand within your projects. You're able to do accurate costing of project tasks. So for example, if I navigate over here to the Resource Center, so imagine that I'm perhaps a resource manager, and I need to come in here to the Resource Center. And perhaps I manage a team of accountants. You can see here we've got about 5 or 6 people that are nested under the role accounting. So by the way, these different roles that you see here, accounting, analyst, consultant, creative, those are parameters that you can define and configure in your own environment. Okay, so I have some generic type roles set up in here like accounting, analyst, et cetera. You can make these as specific or as high level as need be. So as I was saying, if I needed to go in and, let's say this ARIA here is really only available about 50% of the time for project work. And, I don't want people, requesting or assigning her more than 4 hours a day of project work. I could come in here. I can edit her resource settings. I can specify that she's working the correct calendar. Okay, so if we have multiple calendars in the system, you got holidays, start and end times, things like that, I can specify that. I can come down here and I can say what I just said there, that her current max units is 50%, okay, of that calendar. So assuming her calendar is an 8-hour day, 40-hour week, this is essentially going to tell the system that she's available for project assignments up to 4 hours a day. So that will come into play when we take a look at our overall, full-time equivalent calculations within that accounting pool, and when we take a look at, demand and utilization of our resources once we have resources on our projects assigned work. Okay. All right, so let me navigate back to the landing page and just talk about a couple other things we have on this landing page. So as Victoria mentioned, we have several add-on applications to Project Online. So you are not looking at a vanilla, just out-of-the-box Project Online page here. There's a couple things that are part of our quick PMO suite of applications. I'll try to do my best today to point out when I am showing you something that's part of Quick PMO, that's not just native Project Online capability. So this dashboard you have below the tiles is an example of that. So this dashboard can be configured to look across all the projects in the portfolio, filter out certain projects, and it's a way to, quickly and easily tell, let's say for instance that I manage this e-commerce portfolio here, and I want to see how are my projects doing within the e-commerce portfolio. I can click on that tile in the dashboard, okay, and all of these charts are connected to each other. So when I select this e-commerce, I'm now able to see the types of projects I have within that portfolio. I'm able to see the different phases those projects are in within that portfolio. And I'm also able to see how many of my projects are, green, red, yellow in terms of an overall health status, so how those projects are performing. Okay. So that said, let me navigate into the Project Center. So anybody that's ever worked with Project Online or Project Server, Project Center is typically where your PMs will go, your program managers, portfolio leads, things like that. They'll go in here to interact with the various projects that are loaded in the system. There are security groups in here that will govern what you can see when you're in the Project Center. So for instance, if we have 100+ projects loaded in here, but my role is that of a PM, and I'm the PM for 10 of those projects, then I would just see, whatever those 10 projects happen to be in here. So it will only show you. So it does sort of security trimming here. It will only show you the objects that you have access to. Now, throughout today, I'm going to be signed in as an administrator. So when I show you different functionality that's relevant to a PM or relevant to a resource manager or relevant to maybe a portfolio lead or something like that, I'll sort of describe it in a manner that I'm taking off my PM hat now and I'm putting on a resource manager hat. So it's pretty clear what type of functionality you're looking at. But in terms of my actual account, I'm going to be signed in throughout the demo as an administrator who has access to everything in here. So I can see every project that's in the Project Center. Okay. When I view the projects, I can select different views in here so that I can sort, filter, group, basically slice and dice the list of projects in different manners. And those different views can have different columns. So these are all project fields. Some of them could also be schedule fields that I'm showing here. Okay. To the right, I have a Gantt chart, which can actually be toggled on and off. Okay. So if you have a lot of projects and you're really just using this as a portal to get into the project details, you don't necessarily have to show the Gantt chart. So you can select whether or not you want to have the Gantt displayed. But having this Gantt displayed at the project level, it gives you a glimpse of how your projects are overlapping with each other. So for instance, if I was to group these by a specific thing, like group them by the portfolio, okay, I can see how projects within a specific portfolio perhaps are overlapping. So let's say I collapse all of these down. All right, so I'm going to take this outline level thing here and collapse it down, and then just expand out this 2020 vision portfolio. Okay, and then over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out so I can see, a timeline level where I can kind of get a glimpse of which projects in that portfolio are overlapping. Okay, I can also tell some details on those projects here, like I can see which projects have some progress on them because there will be a gray bar inside the blue bar. A lot of the projects within these portfolio have not kicked off yet, so I can see that there's no indicator of that. Okay, and then of course, if I want to navigate into a project and start editing its schedule, any of the field values, start to log risks, issues, access the project site, things like that, I can simply click on it. Okay, so whichever project I want to access. So for instance, the software development plan. If I click on that one, it's going to take me into the details of that project. Okay, and this area right here is very configurable, but there are, one or more what we call project details pages where you can go to access different types of information. Like, here's my governance page. This shows me I'm actually using a workflow with this type of project to show me where I am in the life cycle. So I can see this particular project is in a planning phase. Okay, and it's sitting right now at a plan gate. It's at a stage gate within that plan phase, there's a decision point here, so there might be some approvals or things like that that have to happen once I submit this thing to move forward from plan to whatever the next phase of this workflow is, which in my case is the manage phase. So things like these phase values and these different stage gate values, they also are configurable. So if you follow very PMBOK style, you do a lot of waterfall projects, and you use phase names of initiation, planning, execution, closing, very commonly used throughout the industry, you could plug those in as your phase values. And within initiation, you might have a couple stage gates in there, like complete the charter, do a business case analysis, things like that. So those can all be configured as part of your project settings and the governance workflow that controls that. Okay. If you use different types of methodologies, maybe you use Scrum or you use Lean, Six Sigma type stuff, and your phase values match the DMAIC acronym, so define, measure, analyze, et cetera, you could plug those phase values in, and you can have both. So you could have some projects that are following a Lean methodology, and when I'm looking at that, I would see the DMAIC phases up here, and it tell me exactly where I am in the life cycle. Some projects that follow more of a waterfall SDLC, and I can see those, again, initiation, planning, execution, closing. Okay. So if I navigate back to the Project Center, I will definitely go through some of these different details pages as we move on, but if I come back to the Project Center, one way to get new projects into the system is up here in the menu. I can select the new drop-down on projects, and I have various templates that are defined here. Okay, so out of the box, this thing is going to ship with 2 templates that are defined. Okay, an enterprise project and then a task list style project. Okay, but you can configure additional templates in here that give you certain features such as having a starter schedule. So for instance, when I create a new project and I select this software development template, okay, I already have a work breakdown structure associated with those projects. So all I have to do is go in and tweak the tasks. Okay, maybe add new tasks if new tasks are needed, reorder them. So I don't have to create a schedule from scratch when I'm building a software development project. I can take a starter template, which might be very high level or might be very detailed, but I have a starting point to go in there and then fine tune my particular software development project schedule needs. Okay. If I pick, say, a marketing campaign, that would have a very different schedule template than a software development project. Marketing campaigns are probably, not always, but probably shorter in nature. So the duration of an overall marketing campaign schedule might not last as long. And not always. Some marketing campaigns take quite a bit of time, but in general, at least our marketing campaigns are a little shorter in duration than some of our software development projects. So again, choosing the right template here, will determine a lot of the initial settings and a lot of the features of the projects that you create in here. Okay, like workflow, things like that. So. One way, if you have lots of ideas that float within the organization and you want to, store those ideas in here, I mean, one option you certainly have is just to come in here and create a project for every idea. Problem with that approach is it can tend to muddy the waters in here. So you need to now sort of painstakingly set up different views so that you can distinguish your ideas from your in-flight projects, okay? And any of those ideas that they don't get approved and converted into real projects, that, they never take flight, they never see the light of day, you've got some maintenance to do at some point where you're going to want to weed those out, okay? So while that approach can certainly be taken, a cleaner approach that we usually advise is to create an ideation list, okay? So I use one here, I call it the intake hub. So when we have ideas or we have intake, okay, I can control who has access to this list. And certain people, maybe representatives of different departments, or maybe representatives of the different PMOs within our organization, they can come in here and, whatever project ideas or proposals they've heard from within their teams, they can submit them here. So this list can be completely configured so that you're collecting the right type of metadata that you need to evaluate these entries. Okay, so for instance, you might not want to collect too much detailed entry at the idea phase because you might not know that much information. But once you convert one of these ideas to a project, okay, then you can use some of the analysis and reporting tools that you have in Project Online to determine, A, how are we going to move this thing through its life cycle, and B, if we run this thing through an analysis, are some of these new ideas that we've converted to projects going to actually take flight? Okay, or are they candidates for being canceled, being put on hold, things like that. So what you're seeing in my list here, I have, I've got the proposed project name, which could certainly change once we convert it to a project, but what I think I might call the project, what region it's related to, what I estimate the total benefits and the total cost are. So, high level estimate. So if I'm, adding a new item here, if I have a very detailed breakdown that sort of spells out where I got these benefits and cost estimates from, well, I can certainly, attach that. For instance, if I have them in an Excel spreadsheet, I can attach those to the entries. And that's going to become valuable when the review team comes in here and takes a look at which ideas we're going to review, this week, this month, or whatever, to determine which ones might get converted into projects. Okay. I can collect other things too, like what I suspect the risk rating on this type of project might be. Should we actually turn it into a project? Is this a regulatory? Is this driven by some type of regulatory compliance requirement? Simple yes or no there. Okay. So again, you can configure whatever fields are necessary here. You can use some neat SharePoint capabilities like this rating system here, so you can have different people come in and apply a rating on these ideas. And that I wouldn't necessarily use that as my sole criteria for determining what gets converted to a project, but it can be one of the deciding factors that comes in. Okay, and by having different things, again, standard SharePoint functionality like creating different views, so that, again, you can come in here and very efficiently take a look. Here, if I have them grouped by risk rating, I'm going to make sure that only the high-risk projects that have a certain ROI level would actually be, converted into full-blown projects. The rest of them I might, let's consider these a little bit, more before we decide to turn it into a project, okay? When it comes time to turning them into projects, You can do it manually. So there's this create projects option here, which you can do it in bulk, like I have 3 of them selected here. Okay. Or you can have, if you attach a workflow to this list. So for instance, if you wanted to automate things like collecting approvals, we need legal to take a look at this and sign off on it, or we need finance to take a look at this and sign off on it. You can automate those processes through some SharePoint workflows, capture those approvals, and hypothetically speaking, perhaps once the item in this ideation list has been approved by both legal and finance, that alone could then run the action to convert it into a project. So when we talk, art of the possible, there's lots of ways you could go about that. Now, in this case, I'm just showing you manually convert it to a project. Okay, and what it tells me here, is a couple of things. One, it says you already have a project for this, one of the projects that you've selected. So, make sure you use a view where you're filtering out any of these ideas that have already been turned into projects. But beyond that, on the left-hand side, I can see here, these are the columns in this ideation list. And on the right-hand side, these are the project web app fields that I can map these values to. So the point here is that you don't have to rekey or re-enter any of this information from this ideation list should you convert it to a project. That's all going to come along for the ride. So you get to keep, the total cost, total benefits, etc. You can also select here what type of project template you're using when you convert it to a project. All right. So if I do that and I say create project, it's going to take about 15, 20 seconds. And then, except for this Gildan acquisition one that I've already converted to a project, I would typically get a success message. Congratulations, you've created 2 projects. And then I would be able from there to go into the project center and start managing them. So that's exactly the flow that I'm going to follow here. So, imagine if you would, I'm going to switch my view here to a group by project manager. So I'm sort of switching hats now. So I'm moving from somebody who's submitted some ideas to an ideation list, and then I took that hat off and put on the hat of perhaps a portfolio review board or portfolio review team that might be evaluating some of those ideas for conversion to projects. And so now, let's say I got an email once one of those ideas was converted to a project. The workflow could automate that as well. So I get an email that says, congratulations, you've been assigned as the project manager on this project. So now, go in, build the business case, start to set up your resource modeling, okay? Start to do things like building out the budget. So let's take a look at what that process might entail. All right, so if I expand out the projects that I own, okay, I own quite a few projects in this environment here. All right, and if I was to go into one of those projects that was just recently created in here, so I'm going to use this example here, this automated software installation. Okay. Now, normally when you go into a project, it takes you to this very top page here, unless it's a project you've already accessed before, in which case it's going to bring you right back to whichever one of these pages you were on the last time you accessed it. Okay, but this is what I would see on a brand new project. I would see that I'm at this very initial stage of the workflow. Okay, if I have any field requirements below as dictated by this workflow, that's going to be indicated in the table. So that way, if I need to do things like, perhaps go over here to the project budget and cost. Okay, and in this case, I kind of describe what we have here. In my demo environment here, I keep the budgeting details pretty high level. Okay, so first things first, these project estimates, these were actually converted when this automated software installation these were captured when the automated software installation was converted from an idea in that list you were just looking at to a project here. And they're locked down now. So, trust me, I'm trying to I'm trying to hit the backspace key on here. They're not editable. So what I want to do is I'm actually using the workflow to lock these values in. So as I start working on this project and, go over time and we track the actual spend, I can always compare that back to what my original estimates was when it was first created as a project. Okay. Now, down below that, I have a little budget section where I'm able to enter in, once I've procured funding from whoever my funding source is, I can put budget in. Now, these can be configured, again, to whatever level of detailed needs you have. So if you really just need one budget field, so you're specifying, here's the budget we've been given, and this is what we're going to track against, you can set it up that way. In my case, I've gone slightly beyond that, so I'm breaking it out into an operating and capital type budget, and then those two add together. Okay? If you needed to break it down even further, like maybe have your capital budget split up between, things like hardware expenditures, training, software, things like that. You can do that, but instead of creating a bunch of fields on a page here, I would probably look at one of our apps is something called a cost planner app. That basically, it's very Excel-like, so you can break these budget details and cost details down over time. So there's a time-phased element, and you can set up what types of categories you need, and you can get very detailed with that. Okay. Then over here on the right-hand side, what I have is the costs that are actually driven by my project plan or the project schedule. So if I was to look at the project schedule for this and sum up the costs in there, so that's going to be calculated by having work resources and cost resources assigned to various tasks in that schedule. I'm able to see what the total cost of that. Okay. And if there's any progress on this project, there isn't on this one because it's a brand new project, but as we start to get some progress on it, this actual cost number will go up and the remaining cost value will go down. So I'll be able to keep track of how much I've spent over time on it. Okay. I'm also able to show you here where I've broken up the cost within the project to operational and capital as well. Okay, so I can set up a budget for this. Okay, more importantly, I can start to work on the schedule and start to model the demand for this particular project. Okay, so when I come in here, this project, again, this one used that software development template, so all of my software development tasks are set up. If I need to make modifications, I can do so right here in the browser. Okay, but managing a schedule in the browser, while it's convenient and it's quick, it's by no means as robust and as flexible as using MS Project to manage this. So the Project Professional Client application is what I'm referring to there. So if I want to use that to manage the schedule, okay, it might look a little something like this. So I actually already have, okay, a project open, okay, right here in Project Pro. So what I'm able to do in this case, now if I wanted to, like build my cost planning sort of very bottom up, okay, when I go through here, what I can do is take a look at my work breakdown structure here. I've got resources. Now, if this was a brand new project, probably none of the resources in it would be named. They would all be generics at this point. So, I'm doing just planning now. I know the role that I need to do this type of work, but I don't know specifically who. Okay, but still, what I could do is I could come down here and I could use perhaps a little flag. One example might be the expense type flag here. So if I change, okay, these development tasks are all going to be capital expenditures. Okay, so if I change all of these tasks here to capital expenditures, okay, I flag them as CapEx tasks. What it's doing is it's grabbing the cost of that task. So the cost right now is whatever the developer rate is times the amount of work hours there are in the task. Okay, that's giving me the cost, and it's shifting that cost to the right bucket. It's either a capital expense or it's an operational expense. Okay, and then of course within the project, I'm able to roll that all the way up to the top here and see what my total CapEx and OpEx within the project is. Okay, so that's great if you're, if you have enough rigor, within your team of PMs, enough discipline to do this bottom-up type planning. But, again, a lot of times what you really need to do at this stage, the early planning stage, is do top-down planning. Okay, and again, so we've talked about a couple of different options we have for that. Okay, now the other thing that I would typically do with a brand new project such as this is I want to make sure that I model my demand for resources in here. So, what you're seeing right here is, I do have roles, okay, for all the work items until I get down to a certain point here. I don't have any types of roles assigned in here, but let's assume, I don't have a trainer added to my project team yet, but if I add a trainer to my project team, I can select that role, okay, and then utilize that role for all my training tasks. So I want to make sure that I, model what type of resources I'm using in this, so that if I am planning on taking this, pretty early project right now, it's still kind of in the long-range planning phase, and use it as part of a portfolio analysis to determine what the impact of doing this project would be against my in-flight projects. Do I have enough resources to do the work in this project, et cetera? Then I'm able to do that by having this, this type of planning set up here. So, model the demand by specifying which resources you need. As you progress through the project, so let me switch gears here a little bit and just switch over to a different project plan. Okay, one that is a little further along, one that is in flight. Okay, so I have this other one here called B001 SAP integration. Okay, so this project is already in flight. You can see I do have some completed tasks in here. Okay, and the near-term tasks in here are actually assigned to different resources. Okay, but then I get down to some of the future tasks. So June 2nd, that's coming up, I mean, a little over a month from now, and we have yet to determine which developer is going to start work on these development tasks in here. Okay, so if I'm a PM and I'm tasked with staffing this project team, and I'm faced with a situation like this, now in days gone by, before roughly a year ago when Microsoft added a new feature here, okay, what would happen at this point is, PMs might just look in the resource pool, take a look at the developers in there, figure out which one has some capacity, and then basically make a hard booking of that resource, select that resource, put them on the project team, kind of foregoing the process of speaking to that person's manager or whoever's managing that that particular resource's time in the system. So obviously that's not good. So Microsoft introduced something known as the resource engagements feature roughly a year ago, I think perhaps a little more than a year ago. And what it does is it allows you to better formalize and enforce the workflow that should be taking place between a project manager and a resource manager when it comes to staffing their project. So it might work something like this in this new world here. So I take a look, okay, I need a developer. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch over, okay, to my resource tab here, and I'm going to submit an engagement request for developers. So I select developer from the list, put a description in, of course, make it as descriptive as possible. Put in a start and an end and a finish that, at the very least encapsulates the time that I need the work done here. Maybe give yourself a little bit of breathing room, okay? But, make sure you include the dates that are absolutely necessary for this, okay? And then specify how much of this developer or developers' time you need. So if you have a good idea of the amount of work, you can put it in whatever units you want. So you could say 200 hours or 10 days or 2 weeks, whatever. So you could go that route. Or you could do it in terms of full-time equivalents. You could use units and say, roughly, I think I need 3 FTEs during that time period, okay, and put that in for that particular phase. Okay, so if I do that, okay, and I put in an engagement request, now what will happen is there's email capabilities in the tool. And typically speaking, this is optional, but it would then send an email to whoever the resource manager is for the development team, alerting them that there's been an engagement request for a developer, okay? So that resource manager then they would have a hyperlink in their email, okay? And they could open that hyperlink in the email, navigate over to the resource pool here, okay? And what they're able to do, I'll go ahead and scroll down to the developer section in here. Okay. They would be able to take a look at the resource requests that have been made for either specific people or, in this case, just the generic developer within their team. Okay. And they're able to do some neat things like take a look at what the resource assignments are, see what capacity they have for the various developers within their team, see what kind of availability exists. Okay. And then ultimately, perhaps go back here and fulfill that engagement request. Oops, sorry about that. I should not use the back button there. I should have just clicked to the resource pool. But ultimately, so as a resource manager, I can figure out which development resource has availability in that time frame, and then I can, when I go to these resource requests here, okay, I can accept, reject, or in this case, what I would do is I would edit the engagement. I would take developer out, put in an actual developer name, okay, and then go ahead and accept that. What would then happen, so now one last time, if I switch back to a project manager, okay, let's assume that I'm a project manager that went through that process. I requested a resource. A resource manager reviewed it, picked a resource for me, approved the engagement. The next time I access my particular project, I'm going to have a warning such as this right here. New resources have been committed to your project. Okay, and what I'm able to do by viewing that, this is going to take me over to a view called the resource plan. Okay, so a little technical here, but within this platform, there are 2 ways to specify how you're modeling demand within your project for various resources. One is by using the schedule, essentially the Gantt chart that you were just looking at in the other project that I had open. The other alternative is using this resource plan here. So you can say, this is much more Excel-like. You can say, look, I need roughly, in units or in work numbers, I need this person's time in these various time frames here. So you can specify, how much you're proposing, okay, to use somebody. And what you're also able to see here is, okay, this represents a resource engagement that I submitted but has not yet been approved. This represents an engagement that I filled out, but I haven't even submitted yet. It's in draft phase. And this resource down here, Jason, this is one of those engagements that I submitted, and it was actually approved. So So Jason has actually been committed to my project team. Okay, and then I'm able to start assigning work to them. All right. So once at least a baseline of that has been done, you've specified some cost details for your project. You've modeled the resource demand. Okay. There's one other aspect that is typically also done at this point before this project becomes a candidate for analysis using the portfolio analysis feature in here. So let me navigate over to what that is. Okay, so again, let me go back into my project that I was working with. I actually did bounce between a couple different projects, but okay, I'll take one of these projects that I'm managing here. And what I want to do, so this audit tracking solution, I have this thing submitted to the point where right now it's at a stage gate called the selection gate. Okay, that basically means in my environment here, I mean, again, this is configurable, but in my environment, the projects that are sitting at that selection gate are the ones where I feel I've completely built the business case. I've got a resource resource modeling, resource demand modeled in the project. I've done my budget estimates, and I've also scored my project against the drivers that are presented to me for that type of project. Okay, so let me show that to you on an individual project page, and then I'll talk about where those drivers come from, and I'll roll from there right into an actual portfolio analysis. Okay, so when I open this project, I've got a page down here called the Strategic Impact page. Okay, and now somebody within my organization has configured these. What these are called business drivers. So someone within the organization, usually it's by committee, but a group of people have defined these business drivers. So this is what I'm using to measure a project. That allows me to avoid things like, if you present a screen to your project sponsors, your PM, whoever is scoring a project, if you present to them a field which just asks, what's the priority of this project, and you give them choices of high, medium, low, you're going to get 99% of your projects coming back to this is a high priority project. So by building a catalog of business drivers and using the portfolio analysis capabilities in the tool, okay, you're able to definitely get a more nuanced and a more thorough overall prioritization of your projects. So here what I'm seeing is the various drivers that are relevant to this type of project. Okay, and here if I edit my project, I can specify my score values for these. Okay, so these drivers, the names of the drivers, the various thresholds over here, so what constitutes a low, moderate, strong rating, et cetera, those are all configuration points in the system. Okay, so now let me switch hats. Okay, and describe the process of measuring. Hey, when you're taking a look at your portfolio prioritization, the projects within a portfolio. Okay, what we want to do is we want to get a good balance here of the right projects that we're doing that we arguably shouldn't be doing because they're not providing a lot of business value, or they're prohibitively expensive, or they're posing lots of resource constraint issues. This analysis tool is going to give us some real good insights into that and allow us to take action, like perhaps put on hold or cancel certain projects. Okay. So if I'm wearing a hat of somebody that might take part in that analysis, like a portfolio owner, okay, what I would do is I would navigate over to this area here on the left nav, this strategy section. Okay, so I'll kind of walk you through each of these here. So first link I have in the strategy section is my driver library. Okay, so this is the area where I or a team of people working with me went in and set it up our different business drivers. So right now when I'm measuring a project's overall priority, I want to know how well it's doing in areas like improving product quality, increasing market share, reducing expense base, improving customer satisfaction, et cetera. So those are the drivers themselves. Okay. Then when I use those drivers in an analysis, they don't have to all be weighted equally. So some of these drivers might be slightly more important than others when it comes time to an overall prioritization. Okay, so what I can do is I can build these different prioritization models here. So for example, if I show you the executive consensus one, okay, that's a prioritization model where we've said, look, market share is our most important driver when we're analyzing projects using this particular model here, okay? Process improvement is important, but it's a little less important. Customer satisfaction is certainly important, but again, less important than our market expansion and market penetration scores. Okay, and then also, relatively speaking, there's another driver, employee satisfaction, that, again, not unimportant to us, but relative to all the other drivers would be, in this case, the least important, least priority driver. So top to bottom, here's basically the different weights that are applied to those drivers. Okay, and so then if you consider, in my portfolio, okay, there are various projects. When I go back to the project center here, so if I switch to a different view, there are, so projects by phase, there are various projects sitting in this selection gate, okay, along with projects that are beyond that are in the plan and manage phase. So what I want to do is I want to take all of these projects and I want to run them through the analysis tool so I can determine, okay, hey, look, if we do these that haven't started yet, they are still in that selection phase, but if we do them, do they have any adverse effects on our resource pool? Are they, profitable projects, things like that, okay? So on that note, I navigate over here to the portfolio analysis, okay, I will show you what one of these analyses looks like. So normally I would click new here, but I'm going to click on one that I just created before this demo just to save a little bit of time. And you'll still be able to see all of the setup and configuration screens that are involved here. Okay, so when you do an analysis of projects within the portfolio, usually what you'll have is you'll have some kind of time scheme in the naming convention here. So if you're doing this quarterly, annually, monthly, whatever, so you might put in IT portfolio FY 2017 or, IT portfolio March or, something like that. So something that when you go back and review this later on, exactly which analysis you're looking at. So, that's a big part of it, okay? Select which of those prioritization models you want to use. So I'm going to use that executive consensus model in this. Okay, so the projects that score well against those market penetration and market expansion drivers, those are going to be the ones that get the biggest boost. And when you go to actually select the projects, now it's not unheard of to have hundreds or even thousands of projects stored in Project Online. So very key to doing this is making sure you have different column filters or different views set up so that you can automatically just select a view and then pick all the projects that are included within that view. Okay, that way you don't have to come back and say something like, okay, we're going to use that project and this one's ready for analysis, and this, obviously you want to avoid the hunt and peck method of choosing which projects are ready for this analysis. Okay, so I have 22 that are included in this one. Then a couple other areas that we have, so cost constraint. So reviewing the balance of portfolio projects and then imposing different cost constraints is one of the key features that you have here. The other area is the resource constraints. So essentially what I'm setting up here is the ability to do what-if scenarios, playing around with cost, and also what-if scenarios, playing around if it tells me that you do in fact not have enough resources within your resource pool to do all the projects, what are some of the what-ifs I can do around that to get more projects into the mix. Okay, so from there, let's just move over to the next screen. And what I'm taking a look at, of these 22 projects in here, what I can see is every project is a row, okay? And I can see all my driver scores in these columns over here, okay? So if I'm looking at this, so this is my sort of last line of detection here. If I see any that are suspect, so application infrastructure optimization, so if something had like extreme all across the board, what I am able to do is I am able to change these values in here. I'm able to override the driver scores on the project for the purposes of the analysis. So again, usually done by committee, but we can override these values in here. Okay, so once I'm happy with all of these driver scores, when I click to the next screen, what the system's going to calculate for me then is top to bottom what the highest down to lowest priority project is. So my highest priority project is called e-commerce portal development. Obviously, it scored very well against those market expansion and market penetration drivers. All the way down to my lowest priority project, which is a hub upgrade. Okay, so now that's the thing is, yes, it's a low priority project, but it might be something that we have to do due to regulatory or something like that. So all this screen is telling me here is just literally from a business case, what's the highest to the lowest priority project. This one alone is not telling me which projects I can do or should do. That's coming up next. So when I go to analyze cost, what I'm able to take a look at, now when you come in here for the first time, you're going to see this scenario called the baseline scenario here, where it's going to say, okay, all of those 22 projects are selected, and whatever cost constraint you used, it's going to essentially aggregate that value here, and it's going to say it takes $31 million to do all of these projects. Okay? And what you're able to do is you're able to play around with this cost constraint. Or you can add additional cost constraints, and maybe you say, well, okay, we need to make sure that our capital expenditure on all of these projects is under 3.5 million, for next year or something like that. Okay, so you can, again, use different budget figures to play around with constraint values here. And as you impose different constraint values in here, okay, like I've done here, I've dropped it down to 20 million. I can do that. I can hit recalculate. Okay, and what it'll do is it will rebalance the portfolio. So it's going to say, fine, given a constraint that you've imposed here of $20 million, here's the projects you should do, and here are the projects below that line that you shouldn't do. Okay? Now, of course, you can override this, like I pointed out before. If this hub upgrade, this is a compliance project. We have to do it. Okay, so what you can do is you can come in here and say, hey, I want to force this back in, and let's see what happens if I force that project back in. What's the new balance of projects within the portfolio? So ultimately what you're trying to achieve here is you're trying to get out of the system, okay, some insights into which projects you should be doing, okay, and which projects. Now, this is not going to immediately do anything like delete these or put them on hold or cancel them or anything like that, but you can take this output here and you can then make decisions to perhaps say, okay, we're going to flag this health assessment reporting tool. We're not going to stop it right now, but we're going to flag it as a candidate for being placed on hold. So let's finish out the work we have maybe this week, next week, but then let's take the resources that are on that project and maybe take some of the budget and allocate it to some other projects in here. So that's the power that you have with this. Okay. Then the other side of the house that you have here is the ability to do same thing but from a resource perspective. So when I come over here to my resource analysis, what I'm able to do on this side of the house is see, okay, of the 22 projects that I have, how many of them do I actually have the ability to do? And it's telling me 16 of those projects. Okay. Now, the reason I'm not supposed to be doing, these are not selected, these ones down here, is because there are resource constraint issues. So there's all kinds of ways in here to peel back the layers and figure out where we have resource constraint issues. So why are those 6 projects in that unselected bucket? So I can take a look here at this requirement details. I can see where I have deficiencies in my resource pool. Okay, so for instance, if I look down below, okay, and I go down to these not selected projects, looks like I've got multiple deficiencies here. So I've got some shortages of a manufacturing engineer in February and March. Okay, I've got shortages in marketing following that. I've got shortages in product. Basically, any of the things down here that are highlighted in red is showing you how deficient you are in that role. And the number that you see is a representation of FTE. So some months it's not so bad. I'm only short 0.27 of an FTE, okay, in the month of May here for this particular role. I could probably just ask the people within that team, to do a little bit of overtime, and perhaps it's not going to really impact anything. But when you start to see things like 1.67, I'm almost 2 people short in that month. That's telling me I'm going to have to do something about this project to, to actually be able to do it in the time frame that we're proposing here. Okay. So what you're able to do, I come back to the Gantt chart, my what-if capabilities here are perhaps I can move some of these projects that have not yet started, perhaps I can move them out to a proposed new start date. So instead of this thing starting in, January, let's start it in, November, push it out several months. Okay, so I can try that, hit the recalculate button, see if that was enough to get that project in the mix. The other option that you have is your ability to just throw more cost at it. So what if we hire additional resources? So you can put a number value up here, okay? And what it's going to do, it's going to figure out which resources it's deficient in, so it has that calculation already in here. And whatever value you put in here, it's going to make an assessment where, okay, if I take a look at my hired resource report, it's going to say the best way to spend that money would be to hire these certain resources during this time period, and that's going to allow you to do these specific projects, add them to the mix. So if I take a look at this report, now it's making this assessment based on details that I have in the resource pool. Okay, so this says, you know, financial analyst, I might not be able to hire a financial analyst on a contract basis. Okay, so it might be a stretch to get the acquisition target analysis project back into the mix. But a software engineer, I can probably hire on a contract basis between these two time periods here that's being specified, and that's going to allow me to get these additional projects back into the mix if I decide to do that. Okay, so very, very, very deep analytical capabilities within the tool here. Then if I do that, then again, I can, pass the baton back to my project managers and say, congratulations, your project has been selected. It's going to take flight. You're going to start it, second week of June. So again, make sure you've already specified it, which resources you need, but make sure you have your kickoff meeting and all that good stuff. Okay, so now back to being a PM again, and I take one of my projects that's, perhaps in a managed phase, let's say. So I'm working on this project, and I need to, status it. I need to manage it. I need to do things like, risk management and stuff like that. So what are the different things I can do to report status of my project? So I'll take you through some of the things that you haven't seen here at the project level. Okay. So obviously we have a risks and issues list. That's standard out-of-the-box capability in Project Online. Okay. But what if I want to do things like track action items or change requests? What if some change requests have been submitted that might actually turn into a scope change that might cause us to make some modifications to our project schedule and go back and seek more funding, things like that. So I've got some some lists in here. Now it's Quick PMO that's delivering all of these lists here that are not named risks and issues. So we have an action items, we have a change request, we have a requirements and a deliverables list. So those all come as part of that. And also the ability to add them to a web page up here so that they can be editable when a PM's going through and working the project details. Okay. Also, we have a list called the project status updates where a PM can go in and just put their contextual update for what's going on with the project. So what were some of our key accomplishments this period? What are some of the upcoming tasks? What are some of my hot button issues or comments? Okay. And when I do all that, when I enter all that, okay, it keeps a log of that in the status updates list. Okay. So it is time phased here, such that when I run a project status report, so if you think about the types of details that are generally needed in a project status report, some of them are schedule related in nature. So upcoming milestones, those are probably good candidates for the project status report. Tasks that are late, those are good candidates for the project status report. Sharing any of those types of details with sponsors, with the project team, stakeholders, stuff like that, so that if decisions need to be made to get a project back on track, those decisions can be made. Okay.
So, Aaron, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Did you say that everything besides risk and issues was coming from Quick PMO?
That's true, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, like for instance, this project status report you're looking at here, there is no out-of-the-box project status report in Project Online.
Got it. So this is like an add-in to Project Online or
exactly.
Office 365 project. Got it.
You got it. Yep. Yep. It's an app in the App Store, essentially. So here what you're looking at with this project status report is it automatically, on demand, captures and combines, basically collates details from all the different areas within this platform that I'm storing project information. So the schedule, some of those project field pages, okay? The project site too, which I'll show you the project site next. That's where generally the team will collaborate, upload documents. That's where the actual risks and issues list live, plus those other lists like action items and change requests. Okay, but that or this project status report, is querying all those different areas and combining details together for you here in this report. And this is a configurable status report. So for example, if, like for instance, if you didn't want to show any cost information on the status report, that's probably not a valid scenario. But if you didn't, you could map these fields up here to show different fields. And those could be fields that are calculated from the schedule, or they could just be project fields where somebody's, editing the details, and, maybe you put like location, sponsor, things like this at the top. So these are all configurable up top. Okay, I've got my different KPI trends. So health, schedule, budget, resource. I'm going to explain where some of these come from in a little bit here when we take a look at a different dashboard, but I can see, how we're doing in terms of schedule health, budget health, okay, scope health, et cetera. Okay, several areas that come from the schedule. So here's my upcoming milestones, my tasks that are supposed to be done this week, that are supposed to start next week. I've got a lot of late tasks on this project. I'm glad it's a sample project, but nonetheless, I got about 20 plus late tasks on here, and that's what's reflected in my schedule right now. Okay, so those might be definitely a cause for concern if it was a real project. And then finally at the bottom, any of the active risks and active issues that exist on this. So from an individual project standpoint, one of the reports that we provide is this project status report. Okay. Now, if I do navigate down to the project site, this is one area where we haven't accessed yet. So I'm going to take you to the project site for this particular project, which is called AGH Software Dev. It's a software development project to build an application called AGH. All right. And again, if I can kind of compare and contrast, on a separate tab, I'm going to open up a vanilla out-of-the-box project site. So basically what you get with Project Online, and we'll do a little compare and contrast, and I'll show you some of our quick PMO features as well. Okay, so here is a standard project site for a project. You do have this little project summary, which it will read details from the schedule and show you a timeline down at the project site. So that's nice visibility for the team. The team itself of the project, they don't need to look at the Gantt. They don't need to see the full schedule typically. They just need a high-level representation of where they are. You get a document library. You get this little news feed, so you can have inline, chatting and stuff around the project. And as I said, also you get a risks, issues, and I'm sorry, you do get deliverables out of the box as well. Any of the other lists that are provided that you saw earlier are part of our quick PMO, and also there's lots of visualizations. So here's a quick PMO site for a project in Project Online. So again, we've got these tiles up top, which are completely configurable. So you can brand these however you want. You can add new tiles, reorder the tiles. And as you see, if I hover over them here, okay, the tiles, not only are they navigation tiles, so like if I want to go into the change request list, I just click on the icon to go into the change request list, okay? But when I'm back at the landing page, I can hover over these tiles, and I can see how many items are in each of this. So like if I wanted to just have a sense, how many issues do we have right now? I hover over, I can see there's 6 active, 1 postponed, 1 closed. If I need to log a new risk or issue, I've got a little box here to press to open up the new form, or I can click on this to navigate into the risks or issues list. Okay. And in addition to that, we've got several dashboards that are built on top of the risks list, the issues list. We have a test cases dashboard. We've got a stakeholder analysis dashboard. Okay, so I'll give you an example of a couple of those. So for instance, if I want to see a visual representation of my issues, okay, so that I can go back, so I can go in here, and let's say perhaps, look, I want to focus right now on any process-related issues that we have. So if I use this dashboard, again, and I click on an area of the chart, I'm now focused on my process-related issues. So down below, the table of the actual issues themselves are only showing my process-related ones. Okay. Now one's closed and one's postponed. I'm probably not worried about the closed one, but let's see. Hey, are we ready to set the disposition on this postponed one? So again, I can click on this, and it would take me actually into that particular issue, where I could view any of the other field values, edit it, maybe reassign it to somebody, or if it needs to change state from postponed back to being active, I can do that right off this dashboard. An example of another dashboard that I have for projects is, when I come back to the landing page here, we also have something we generally just call the project dashboard, which when I take a look at it, shows me some similar details to what we have on the project status report, okay, like the name of the project manager description, okay, the department, portfolio, and program that this project belongs to. But this one actually also has the snapshot details of the project. So again, as part of Quick PMO, we've added a snapshot capability to the platform where we can capture details like schedule information or project fields at a, typically it's weekly, but you can set the duration to, whatever makes the most sense for you. But in this case, weekly capture of things like the KPI values, so I can tell how I'm trending in those. Also with things like task progress and milestone progress. If I want to see, a breakdown of, milestones that are completed versus not started, great. But then right below that, I actually have a little burn down chart that shows me how my work is trending over the last 5 periods as well. So this remaining work, I'm hopefully seeing that trending down, which I am. So I'm actually doing work and there's less remaining work. So a trend down, on this part of the chart, and then a trending up on this part of the chart up here. So as my actual work goes up, my remaining work will go down. So I'm able to take a look at that And then also down at the bottom of the page, I've got a little dashboard. Oops, that was an inadvertent zoom there. I think my my control button was still perhaps stuck. There we go.
Aaron,
I'm able to see my
any
active risks and issues. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is there any integration with like Microsoft TFS?
Not natively in the platform, but again, that's an area where we have an application called Project Connect. So if you needed to integrate Project Online with, you use TFS as an example, TFS, Planner, SAP, another platform like maybe Jira or something like that. Yeah, we have essentially an integration hub type application that can be used for that. So again, I want to be clear, it's not something that's a capability of the platform itself where you just go and check 3 boxes and, now you're able to pull, things like your backlog and your user stories and stuff like that from TFS into here. But there are application capabilities that can handle that. All right, so I'm going to navigate all the way back up to the sort of the top level of PWA. So you've seen a lot of details at the individual project level. So now if we take a look, kind of show you the art of the possible when we, show you some of the dashboards. So here I'll point out we have a quick PMO dashboard, and there's also a Power BI dashboard that can be used to slice and dice details within your portfolio to get, again, better business intelligence out of the system. Okay. So one of the dashboards that we provide can be configured so that you can show, a distribution of projects across different departments, across different portfolios, geographic regions. So in other words, it's a very configurable dashboard. I'm going to use a specific one called Portfolio Review Dashboard, where the charts that I have at the top of the page show me a distribution of projects by portfolio. So that way, if I am a portfolio manager and I'm particularly concerned with one of these portfolios, I can come in here, select that portfolio, and then start to drill down into the projects that are within that portfolio. Okay. I've got a projects by PM distribution, so I can see, who owns the most projects, and I can actually use this again to drill into those individual projects. I've got a field called driver where I can specify whether the project is a discretionary project, an NPD, new product development, a process improvement project, an operational project, essentially what type of project we're dealing with here. Okay. And then again, I've got, a health field in here. So let me use this as part of sort of a portfolio review process where right now I'm wearing a portfolio owner hat. Okay. And I'm working with one of my PMs within the portfolio, Aaron. I want to select his pie slice here so that we're just looking at Aaron's projects. And I'm going to use the dashboard as a mechanism to try to drill down into any underperforming projects that Aaron has. Okay, so once I filter it up here in the chart, I can continue filtering it down here in the table. And by the way, this table down here, again, is configurable. So the different attributes that you want to display down here in this table, there's a configuration page that you can go in here and determine which of these fields you want to show. But as I was saying, what I want to do is I want to come in here and let's hone in on the projects that have a red health value for Aaron. And I can see that there are 3 of them here. Okay, in addition to the overall health, I'm also showing schedule health and budget health on this page. So what I'm able to do with this page is, several things. One thing that I often use this for is these hyperlinks over here in the project column are configurable in terms of where they navigate you to. But the default is when I click on the first one, it opens up the project status report. So one of the things we'll use these dashboards for an awful lot is when we need to open up project status reports for maybe 4 or 5 projects at a time, when I'm sitting down with a PM, okay, and reviewing the status of multiple projects that PM is running. This is an easy way so that I'm not clicking 15 times to get from one project to the next. I come to this dashboard and I just click from one to the next to the next. And those project status reports opened up on separate tabs here. So as I navigate to these 3 other tabs that are open, these are project status reports for asset tracking system, Paro ERP upgrade, software development plan. Those are the 3 projects that I'm showing here that Aaron's managing that I have, poor health values. Okay. Now so slightly more specific to this scenario, let's focus on this Apparel ERP upgrade that's showing a red schedule KPI. So how I might, again, drill down into that and figure out why it might be showing a red schedule value is if I click on the schedule link, Again, it opens on a separate tab. Okay. And it takes me directly to the schedule for that project, where I can take a look here. I've got this task health column. And I'll just sort of describe behind the scenes the way that this works. This task health column, it compares the baseline finish date of any task in here with the current planned finish date. Okay, and if the current finish date is at the baseline or out of the baseline, I'll show green. Okay, if I'm slipped past the baseline, but I'm within 10 days, it'll show yellow. And if I've slipped past 10 days beyond what my baseline finish is, I'll show red. Okay, now at the individual task level, I mean, this is sort of a contrived scenario. Every task in here is running behind. Hopefully that wouldn't be the case too often, but nonetheless, if that's the case, then a certain percentage of these is also going to govern whether the overall schedule health value for this project goes from green to yellow to red. So right now, I've got so many tasks that have slipped that my overall project health value should show red, which when I go back here to the dashboard, it does. So that Apparel ERP upgrade project schedule health, so this is a project level field right here, okay? And it's showing that, it's a red value for this particular project right here. Okay. Now, if I take a look at this asset tracking system, this one has a red on the budget health category. So again, project level budget of this is red, but why would it be red? So if I click on that project name, I have this dashboard configured to open up the budget page for my project. Okay, and again here, what I'm able to do is I'm able to compare my budget. So my funding that I received was $125,000. That's my budget to perform this project. But over on the right is where I have my run costs. So again, project plan driven costs. Okay, and even when I baselined it, I was already over that $125,000. But the current plan is indicating that the cost to do this project is $149,000. So that's going to change my status indicator for budget to red. All right, and then again, this is going to be an indicator that, look, we need to sit down here, take a look at this. Do we need to reduce scope of anything in here? Or do we need to maybe look at different resources for some of the work that's yet to be done? How are we going to get the costs back on track with this particular project? But the dashboard has been a pretty leading indicator there that there is, in fact, a budget issue with this project.
Erin, can I ask you another question?
Sure, absolutely.
Go back to where you were. So how are those actual costs coming in?
Down here at the bottom, like this actual cost?
Right. I mean, are they manual entry? Where are they coming from?
So in terms of the art of the possible of how you could do it versus my environment here, this is coming in by virtue of a PM updating percent complete or percent work complete in the schedule. So when they do that, that's calculating the cost of those tasks that are getting updated. So if it goes from 0 to 25, whatever, it does a calculation and it updates this. Okay. Now, what you could have, and what we often configure for our customers out there, now this is a demo environment, so I don't have people coming in here and filling in a timesheet, or the actual resources reporting time. But that is a feature of the tool that a lot of our customers leverage. So resources might fill in a timesheet. There's an approval process, and as their status submissions from that timesheet get approved, okay, those can then roll back into the schedule. And the tasks that that I reported time against, it will update within the schedule. So it'll update that percent complete. Okay, and then so what was the cost of that task? So if I was working on a $5,000 task, okay, it was 50 hours, and my rate is 100 an hour. So there's the $5,000, and I'm 75% of the way through that. Okay, that's going to indicate that you're at $3,500 of actual cost on that one task. Then roll that up across the whole entire project schedule, and that would give you the actual cost of that project itself. So number of ways you could go about it. But,
I was going to say, but how does it handle, I'm 3/4 of the way, through my time frame of when the task should be complete, but it doesn't mean I'm 75% complete. I'm really only sitting at 40.
Well, so there's different percent complete indicators in there. So there's percent complete that's based off the duration. There's also percent complete that's based off of the work itself. Right. So you could be like 75% of the way through the duration, but only 40% of the way through the work.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So the key is that you use the right indicator there. So you use the right field setting when you're doing things like, capturing this cost, so that, you're doing it off of, so for instance, if you're, say, like us, a professional services, duration, of course, counts, but it's really the amount of work that we're completing that counts more for us. So we want to make sure that we're capturing all of this more so off a % work complete than just the % of the duration complete. So that, again, that would just be how we configure this platform to capture and display that accurately.
Got it.
Okay. All right. Okay, so, again, it kind of gave you an example of one dashboard and how you could use this as a, an analysis and process improvement or project improvement, tool. If I navigate into the site contents here, I'll show you an example of a different dashboard. This Office 365 Project Portfolio Dashboard. Now this one uses, under the hood, it essentially uses Power BI. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Power BI, but it's Microsoft's, business intelligence platform that can be used to report against essentially anything that's in Office 365, not just Project Online, but if you've got applications that utilize Azure for SQL data storage, and you want to build dashboards against those, you could use Power BI for that. If you've got SharePoint information in there, other applications that are in the cloud or on premises, Power BI, particularly if it's stored in any type of Microsoft platform, could be a pretty good candidate. Okay. You can also use Power BI to report things like social sentiment. So if your organization has a Twitter page and you want to see a dashboard of, like positive, negative, Twitter comments and stuff like that, or, times that, you've had something retweeted, you can you can even use Power BI for that. So with this particular one, though, of course, we're looking at project and portfolio information. Okay, so like for instance, over here on the left, I can see my cost versus my baseline cost grid. And as you hover over these, you can kind of get a sense here. So baseline cost in the thousands is on this x-axis, and the cost, not baseline cost, is on the y-axis. So right now they're all pretty in line, where our actual cost and our baseline cost is not too far off from one another. But I start to get down here some of them where the the actual cost and the the plan cost and the baseline cost have deviated a little bit. So I can tell that here. And if I click on in any one of those projects like I just did there, it's going to drill into that particular project for me. So I clicked on that, what do you know, that AGH software dev project, okay? That brings me back to a series of pages that I have here. So I can see where I have slipping tasks, okay? And there are 3 of them. And again, if I click on these, it's going to allow me to drill into that information, okay? I can see top resources over here with task discrepancies, like either work or cost overruns, okay? And as I hover over them, or it's work that is late or has missed a deadline, I'm able to glean that type of information as well. Down over here at the bottom, I've got my different pages that, again, by clicking on these up here, is just essentially going to navigate me to the different pages down below, where I can see where I have my cost or work overruns, any missed deadlines, issues, risks. So, the way that these are built, again, Power BI under the hood, Power BI is a pretty user-friendly tool to use. So if you've ever, say, built a pivot table or a pivot chart in Excel, okay, it's not a super steep learning curve to take those skills and apply it to, the Power BI platform and be able to build charts like this. Okay. If I move from the dashboard page to more of an executive summary, that's just a different page within this Office 365 portfolio dashboard. Again, I'm able to see here, so kind of using a tile type presentation here, I'm able to see some information like who the PM is, what our % complete is, start, finish, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and again, see some more specific details down below. Okay, like current project milestones, active project issues. So again, a lot of the data of the project presented on different pages, which all of which can be, let's say, like exported to PowerPoint, printed, shared with people outside the organization. If I go back up top and I bounce back into, say, individual projects here, then again, I can take a look at, top projects with a finish and cost variance. So any projects that have a finish or a cost variance, I'm able to see, how they're slipping. Okay. Again, click into the project and it can bring me back to the specific details on those projects itself. Okay. So I can move through and, take a look. For instance, this one had, you know, a fair amount of cost variances in it, so I can sort of drill down to which task in the schedule are showing those cost variants. So obviously, when I baselined it, I was expecting the task to cost a certain amount, and now I'm either using more expensive resources or the tasks are taking longer. In either case, it's resulting in more cost for those, you know, individual tasks within the schedule, so I'm able to analyze that from this particular dashboard. So last kind of hat change. I'm running a little later than I had hoped to here, but you know, it's okay. I definitely do not want to omit the resource manager role in all of this and what a resource manager can get back out of the system. So you saw a little bit already where a resource manager can take part in that engagement process and have some control, have some say over what resources get pulled from, you know, from their team, put on projects, and assigned work. So, you know, they definitely have an ability to manage that. But then from a standpoint of keeping tabs, okay, you know, great. You know, I mean, I know that I approved Jason to do some work on a project last week, and, you know, I approved Chris to do some project work this week. But, you know, I need a big picture here. What is my team doing from day to day? Okay, so we've got a resource schedules report that can be used, sort of a tactical report, if you would, to keep tabs of what's on your team's plate from day to day to day. And we also have a more strategic report that you might use for things like, you know, LRP, portfolio planning, stuff like that. So this resource schedules, what I'm able to do here, set my time frame, start and end period, select my resources, and, you know, filter them down by different roles. So maybe what I want to take a look at is I want to take a look at the developers and the software engineers and the solution architects. So those are the 3 roles that I've selected. Maybe I only want to select from within a department like IT, so I can, you know, further filter them by department value, or filter them by where they are in the reporting structure. So that's the RBS, the resource breakdown structure. Okay. Or I can say, you know, hey, look, let's also just look at the committed assignments. So if it's, you know, somebody's been proposed, particularly like maybe a generic resource, but they're not committed to doing work on a project, I might want to filter that out of this. Okay, so I've got a lot of different filter parameters in here. Okay, but nonetheless, once I hit the filter button, I'm able to take a look. So if this is my team, now I actually selected multiple roles, so this is probably some people outside my team, but nonetheless, I'm able to see, you know, from day to day, okay, what the different users on my team have on their plate. Okay, and also there's a little color code indicator here where I'm able to see if people are over allocated, that would show in red. Okay, a little bit under allocated would show in yellow, or they're hitting the sweet spot. And again, this report, it's configurable so that I can determine, you know, look, if let's say it's between 0 and 25%, show yellow because they're used, but they're not very well used. If it's between, say, 25 and 100, show green, but if it's over 100, show red in here in terms of utilization. So here I can see Jonas. Okay, so Jonas, when we get a little bit later on into May, he's on this payroll system upgrade, and the PM of that project has him on 16 hours a day of work in that. Okay, so before the 29th rolls around, and I got you know, a month to do something about this, I need to get with the PM of that payroll system upgrade and you know, figure out, look, you got too much work on Jonas's plate right now. We either need to get another, so if Jonas is a software engineer, another software engineer in there and distribute the work evenly among them, or spread this work out over a longer period. I mean, again, this can, you know, give me a little bit of insight when that needs to happen. Navigate back to the landing page. So that was, again, kind of more of a tactical type report. Okay. For more strategic planning, what I've got the ability to do is take a look at a individual resource level, what's coming up and what's currently on somebody's plate in a given time frame. Okay, so let's say, you know, starting beginning of this week, 24th, and maybe going out to the end of May. Okay, again, what I'll do is I want to focus on, let's just say, my solution architects. So I select those, okay, hit apply over here, and I'm able to see what kind of assignment work we have on, you know, Ray, Cindy, and Aaron. Those are my 3 solution architects in here. What's on their plate for, you know, the remainder of April. I didn't pick much of April, just the last week, and then in May. Okay, so again, from a planning standpoint, if, you know, if a PM has come to me and said, look, I need a solution architect May for, you know, some new work that we're doing, a new work stream in a project or a new project that didn't exist, I can come over here and I can see, hey, Ray has some assignment work, Aaron has some assignment work, Cindy has absolutely nothing on her plate for that month. So as I expand the table down here below, I can verify that, and I can see what the overall utilization of these resources is from month to month. And again, use this, kind of as the basis to determine who's available to do, new work streams. And another way to go about that from a purely strategic planning standpoint is to take a look at it at the role level. So a good example of this is, you guys saw me step through that portfolio analysis a little while ago, which, I sort of flew through it. Truthfully, to do a proper portfolio analysis, you really need to carve out at least an hour, if not more, to go through that. That's a long time to get to an endpoint of seeing, hey, if we did 3 new projects at the beginning of June, and we know those projects, they're software development related, we're going to need a BA up front. Okay, we're going to need a design architect up front. The types of roles you're going to need early on in the projects. Can we do them, or is that just pie in the sky, wishful thinking? Type of report like this would allow you to determine that, perhaps. So if I, again, if I pick solution architect, let's say, and analyst. Okay, starting now in this case, I don't know if I have that many projects assignments that far out. So let's use beginning of May. That doesn't leave me much time for planning, but again, it is a demo environment. So beginning of May, going through the first several weeks of May, if we take a look at a role level, what we have going on our plates in that time period and what we have available, this is going to be very useful for strategic planning. Okay, so I can see here, in this time period, okay, the architects don't have a lot of work on their plate. Analysts have a whole lot, and then this black line up here represents the total capacity. So now, while architects don't have much and analysts have a whole lot, okay, I might have a lot more analysts in my pool than I have architects. So I can see here when I filter the architects out, even though this is a ton of hours, still the architect role itself, the analyst role, I got the wrong one here. The analyst role itself, once I filter the architects out, are really only working at about, if I expand the table down here, 50% utilization for that month. So yeah, we would absolutely be good if there's a heavy load of analysts that are needed for those projects. And if I do the same thing, focus on solution architects are also, the bar goes way down for them. I obviously have far fewer solution architects in my pool. Okay, so even though there's only 200 hours of work in the month for them, that's 37% utilization for them. So obviously, I've got different size within those 2 different pools. So again, this type of dashboard could be used, very strategically to determine, hey, if we do any new projects that are going to put a load on these types of resources, are we asking for it, or do we have some bandwidth to take that on? So on that note, I've kind of, if I do go back to the slide here, I did touch upon several dashboards, drilling behind them, and then finally, ending up at what my team is doing as the final, the resource manager area. Now I realize we kind of came right up to 12:30 Eastern, but I will stay on a few extra minutes. So anybody has any questions that haven't already been asked? Didn't hear any coming in on the chat window, and as I pull the chat window up, I don't see any typed in here, so that's fine. So Victoria, do we email a link to the recorded version of this and an evaluation, I believe you mentioned earlier?
Yep, exactly. So we will be emailing out a survey as well as the link to this recording. So just stay tuned for that in the next day.
Great, great. So again, if anybody has any questions, technical or otherwise, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Until our next webcast, Aaron.
Exactly.
Until our next webcast.
You got it. You got it. Yeah, so vibrantfusion.com/events. That's where you can keep tabs of our upcoming events. Of course, if you're already on our mailing list, you will get a proactive alert to them.
And our next webcast will be on May 31st, focusing on increasing productivity with Microsoft Teams and Planner. So that should be a unique and exciting topic to touch on.
Definitely. Yep.
And what was Planner again? Sorry.
So Planner, in a nutshell, so whereas Project Online is a full-featured, sort of far end of the spectrum PPM, you can do everything in here. Planner is a bit more for like light, agile teams that really just need to do some task management. It's a very visual task management tool. It's also part of Office 365. But it's a way you can come in here and, like for instance, just keep tabs of to-do lists that are assigned to various people, and keep tabs of the progress on them. Assign work to different people. A lot simpler to use than Project Online. But again, obviously it's not meant to compete against Project Online. This is just for, again, smaller teams, quick task management, to-do management, stuff like that, and still have visibility and, metrics and lots of insights that you can pull back out here. That's what Planner is in a nutshell. Never described Planner in 30 seconds before, but that's it.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your attendance. Appreciate you being able to take some time out of your busy day. And again, if you would please reply to the survey that we send out later. It helps us a lot to, fine-tune our content for future presentations. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erin.